Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the second part of our story. Let's jump right back in. When they woke, they shared a tender moment before getting out of bed to start the day. Sarah went into town and John started working around the ranch. Sarah went to a local RV dealer and asked about rentals. The dealer had a small camper van that was more of a conversion van. She arranged to rent it for 2 weeks. She figured the tinted windows with blinds in the back would be useful for any surveillance they might need to do. She had the dealer hold the keys so she could pick it up early Friday morning. He agreed to let her leave her pickup on his lot. Sarah bought a baseball cap for John and a pair of sunglasses with the darkest tint she could find. She almost got mirrored ones but worried they'd draw attention. She wanted him to be as anonymous as possible in Denver. She also stopped at a camera store and bought a 35mm SLR camera with a telephoto lens and some high-speed film. Sarah took care of the animals for the rancher and the farmer, gave them their shots, and started back to her ranch. She stopped at the ranch next to hers, gave the boy who'd agreed to care for her animals last-minute instructions, and paid him. When Sarah pulled up to her cabin, she saw John working inside the barn. She took her medical bag out of the car and made sure there was nothing in the pickup that might tempt a thief while it was at the dealer's. Sarah walked to the barn. "I found some tools and nails, so I started fixing some of the things that needed repair," John said. Sarah saw the repairs were done professionally and realized she'd been letting the place slide for a while. "You're getting to be quite a rancher," she smiled. "It feels like home here," he said, his eyes meeting hers. Sarah felt a tug at her heart. She went to him and hugged him. They walked into the cabin, and Sarah told John about the van and the camera in disguise. They made dinner and washed dishes together. They agreed to go to bed early so they could pick up the van before the RV dealer opened. They made love again, just as passionately as the night before. Sarah and John fed the animals and left the ranch at 5 in the morning. They drove to town, and Sarah insisted John wear his hat and sunglasses as soon as it got light. The van was where the RV dealer had said it would be. They loaded the clothes, camera, and other things they thought they'd need. John parked Sarah's pickup as she pulled the van to the entrance of the RV lot. The trip to Denver was uneventful. Sarah did all the driving since John had no ID or driver's license. They reached Denver in the early afternoon and looked for a motel. They found a small, independent motel on the outskirts of town and unpacked the van. Sarah got the camera ready, and John took the phone books and copied down phone numbers he thought they might need onto motel stationery. Sarah went to a fast food place and brought back food. They didn't want to risk John being seen and recognized. After they ate, Sarah and John drove to the home of Lily, the secretary John trusted. They parked the van down the street. "Her car's not here yet, so I guess she's still at work," John said. Around 5:45 in the afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway and into the carport. John and Sarah got out of the van and walked towards the woman getting out of the car. As John approached, he said, "Lily." The woman looked at John. He took off his dark glasses. "Oh my God," she whispered, and started to faint. John rushed forward and caught her just before she hit the concrete. Sarah grabbed Lily's purse, found her house keys, unlocked the door, and John carried Lily inside, laying her on the sofa. Sarah got a glass of water from the kitchen. Lily started to open her eyes. She reached up and touched John's face. "You're dead." "You're not dead." "No, I'm not dead, Lily," John said, holding her hand tightly. It took several minutes before Lily could say anything else. John helped her sit up on the sofa, and he and Sarah sat beside her. "Everybody thinks you're dead," she said, her voice full of wonder. "I want everybody to think that for a while," John told her. Lily looked at Sarah. "Who are you?" John explained how Sarah had found him and nursed him back to health, detailing the terrible condition he'd been in. "Thank you for bringing him back to me," Lily said to Sarah, tears running down her cheeks. Sarah could sense there was more between them than just employer and secretary. "I always considered him the son I never had," Lily added. "What happened to you, John?" Lily asked. "Why did you disappear from the restaurant?" John looked at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Lily, I have amnesia from the beating I took. There are still things I don't remember. I don't recall anything about the days before Sarah found me. We were hoping you could provide some answers." They moved to the kitchen so Lily could get more water. "You had asked me to get the records for the PUD division Clara was running," Lily said. "And you told her you wanted to meet her and Tom Evans at the restaurant to go over your plans for the division." John explained to Sarah that PUD stood for Planned Urban Development. "Tom Evans saw the folders on my desk and got upset that you were looking into the files," Lily continued. "I knew you were going to step in because the division was losing so much money. You arrived at the restaurant for the meeting. You'd booked a private room because you expected trouble from Clara and Tom." Lily spat out Tom's name like it was poison. "Someone came into the restaurant and told you they saw smoke coming from under the hood of your car. You went out to check, and that's the last anyone heard from you. About 6 weeks later, They found your plane in Utah and said you died in the crash. Lily looked sharply at John. When did you schedule that airplane, John? Why didn't you ask me to do it? John didn't answer. He was staring at the far wall, his face pale. Sarah saw his expression. What's wrong, John? Are you remembering something else? Yes, he said slowly, his voice strained. I remember now. There was a van parked next to my car, and when I was looking at my car, two men jumped out, put a sheet over my head, and hit me hard. I was dazed. He continued staring at the wall. I remember the two men now. I had fired them for failing the drug test we give all employees. Lily, tell me anything else about the meeting you can remember, John asked urgently. Clara and Tom Evans were late for the meeting, she said. They arrived about 25 minutes after you left the restaurant and waited for about an hour, then left. Your car was found at the airport. When Clara had me check on our company plane, the mechanic said you'd called and asked him to get it ready because you had an emergency meeting in Dallas. But the mechanic said he never saw you get into the plane. He just assumed you were at the controls. Someone had filed a flight plan for Denver to Dallas, but the FAA couldn't remember any details about the person who filed it. Why didn't you tell the FAA that I always booked my flights through you? John asked, his voice rising with anger. Clara transferred me to the warehouse as secretary to the warehouse supervisor the day after you disappeared, she said quietly. Why, John? Sarah asked, her eyes narrowed. She said the company was moving in new directions and that I'd be happier in that position, Lily said, slumping in her chair, the memories clearly taking a toll. John, the shock of seeing you and having to relive that day has worn me out. Sarah and John filled Lily in on the events of the past weeks, telling her it would be best if she moved out of her house. Things were about to get dangerous, and she might be in danger too. Sarah had Lily call the local police and tell them she'd be gone for about a week, asking them to keep an eye on her house. Sarah hoped this would prevent anyone from looking for Lily and foiling their investigation. Sarah and John helped Lily pack enough clothes for a week. They drove to the motel, and Sarah got a room for Lily next to theirs, asking her to come to their room after she'd settled in so they could ask her a few more questions. Lily went to her room, and Sarah and John went to theirs, all of them exhausted. Sarah looked through the yellow pages, found a Chinese takeout that delivered, and ordered for the three of them. Lily knocked on their door shortly after the food arrived. They sat and ate while John asked more questions. Lily, is there any way I could get my hands on any of my money? He asked, a desperate edge to his voice. Lily thought for a moment, then her face brightened. There's your personal account, the one you keep for emergencies, she told him. If you remember, we're both signatories on that account, so I could get money for you if you couldn't get to the bank. Her face clouded over. I'm sorry, John. I completely forgot about that account. I wasn't trying to hide anything, she said, tears welling in her eyes. John patted her hand reassuringly. Lily, I would trust you with my life. I would never question your honesty. You and I both have ATM cards for that account, she added. It's not a company account, and the statements come to my house, so no one will know. Great. Then we have access to some money, he smiled, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. Lily said she was exhausted and wanted to try and get some sleep before she collapsed. John got Tom Evans's home phone number from her before she went back to her room. They decided to go to Staples in the morning to buy a prepaid cell phone, so any calls couldn't be traced. Sarah stretched, saying she was exhausted too. They undressed and Sarah got into bed. I'll let you get some sleep tonight, John said with a tired grin. Sarah patted the bed beside her. I'm not that exhausted. John slid in next to her, and she turned to him, kissing him softly. They held each other close for a long time before finally falling asleep. The next morning, they got up and showered together. After dressing, Sarah knocked on Lily's door and told her she'd pick up breakfast. Sarah went to a McDonald's a few blocks away and got coffee and breakfast for the three of them. They ate and made plans for how they'd get the information they needed. John questioned Lily some more and found out that Clara had delayed the annual audit of the company books, using John's death as an excuse to give them time to sort things out. This worried John. She's either trying to steal money or hide something, he said. Do you know of any big purchases since I've been gone? Lily thought for a minute. They bought new Lincoln Navigator SUVs for both of them. John shook his head in disbelief. $150,000 company cars? They justified it because they'd have to travel to Los Angeles for that big contract. What big contract? John asked sharply. The water treatment plant you were working on before you disappeared, she answered. You mean we got that? He asked, surprised. It was signed the day before you disappeared, Lily replied. Didn't you know about it? John shook his head. Things were starting to click into place. The project was huge with massive profit potential. John remembered finding several engineering flaws that would lead to big change orders. He'd pointed them out to the engineers, but they hadn't wanted to go back to the city for more money on the base contract. The agency overseeing the contract knew the city would approve change orders but would balk at increasing the initial price. "Let's start playing some games," John said, a grim determination in his voice. They left the motel, and Lily insisted on going with them, despite Sarah and John trying to dissuade her. Sarah stopped at Staples and bought the prepaid cell phone. They staked out John's offices, watching as Clara and Tom pulled into the parking lot in separate cars. Clara walked over to Tom, talking to him with agitated gestures. John wished he knew what they were saying. Once they were sure Clara and Tom were in the office for the day, Sarah drove them to the local newspaper office. John and Lily stayed hidden in the back of the van while Sarah searched the newspaper archives for any clue about what Clara and Tom were up to. While Sarah was gone, Lily looked at John. "Sarah seems like a very nice person," she began. "You two seem to have something going on? Or am I wrong?" John looked at Lily, a soft smile touching his lips. "Sarah saved my life, Lily. I guess things have progressed beyond what either of us expected." Lily grinned knowingly. "The walls in that motel aren't exactly soundproof, John. You kept me awake." John started to stammer, blushing. Lily took his hand. "John, I'm happy for you. Clara knew I never liked her for you, and I was afraid you'd sense my mistrust. I didn't feel it was my place to interfere in your personal life, though now I wish I had." "I wish you had butted in too," John said quietly. "Sarah is the type of woman you need, John," Lily said gently. John took Lily's hand again, his expression softening. "Lily, I have to ask you something personal. I always thought there was something going on between my father and you. Was I right?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. John put his arm around her shoulders. "Your father and I were lovers for years after your mother died," she said, her voice trembling. "We had discussed marriage just before they found out he had cancer. He wouldn't marry me after he got sick because he didn't want to be a burden, and he had to make sure the business was stable for you to take over." "Why didn't you get married before he got sick?" John asked, confused. "He was afraid you'd feel he was dishonoring your mother's memory," she said quietly. "That's nonsense," John retorted, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been a mother to me ever since my mother died. I loved you like I loved my own mother." John's anger flared. All he did was throw away years of happiness for the two of you. "I know, John. Don't let that happen to you," Lily said, her voice firm. "Don't let Sarah get away, or you'll have me to deal with. Clara will be the least of your worries," she added with a small smile. Sarah got back into the van. "Interesting," she said, a thoughtful look on her face. "The FAA, the NTSB, and the FBI are all investigating the plane crash." "Why the FBI?" John asked, surprised. "They don't usually get involved in something like this." Sarah shrugged. "The newspapers didn't have much to say about the crash that we don't already know. The main thing they're writing about is the reorganization of the company and the sell-off of certain divisions." John's anger flared again. "Get this van back to the office. I want to see what happens this afternoon. There's no reason to reorganize anything or sell off divisions." He was so furious that Sarah and Lily had trouble calming him down. Sarah parked the van a safe distance from the parking lot, and they waited for the office to close. Around 6 o'clock, Clara and Tom came out of the office, paused next to Clara's car, and then drove off together. Sarah followed for several blocks until it was obvious they were going somewhere together. "Stop following them," John said, his voice tight with anger. "Park the van for a while. They're either going to my house or Tom's. I know where I live, and I know where Tom lives." Sarah could see he was too furious to talk rationally. She pulled into a Burger King drive-thru and ordered food. They ate in silence in the van. John finished his dinner quickly, fuming about Clara destroying his company. Sarah and Lily let him vent his anger. When he had calmed down enough to talk, Sarah asked what he thought they should do. "Let's play games," he snapped. "I think it's time to use that cell phone." He told her they needed to find out which house Clara and Tom were at. He showed Sarah how to get to his house. Both SUVs were in the driveway. "Drive past the house and park about 5 blocks away," he instructed. Sarah pulled over to the curb as directed. They couldn't be seen from John's house. Sarah and John agreed that Sarah wouldn't mention John was alive, or that they knew where his body was. John was afraid if something went wrong, someone would go to Sarah's ranch to see if she was blackmailing them. "Let's make a phone call," John said with a grim smile. Sarah picked up the cell phone and dialed the number John gave her. Clara answered quickly. "Hello, Clara. Good to catch you at home," Sarah said, barely able to keep from laughing. "Who is this?" Clara snapped. Sarah continued, her voice smooth. "I heard you might be interested in buying some pictures and tapes of some very interesting phone taps." Clara paused before answering. "Tom told me you want $5 million. We might be able to raise that if the information is worth it." "Oh no," Sarah replied sweetly. "That's Tom's share. Yours is $5 million too." Lily and John could hear Clara screaming into the phone. I can't raise that kind of money. Sarah was enjoying Clara's misery. Let's see. Kidnapping, murder, conspiracy to commit murder, battery, and I'm sure the police can think of a few more charges, she said into the phone. Sarah heard footsteps and knew that since they couldn't get the number from caller ID, they were looking up and down the street for a car and someone using a cell phone. That ought to be good for about 50 years in prison, maybe even life, she told Clara before Clara could answer. I'll contact you tomorrow and tell you where to deliver the money. Tell your secretary to accept any call from Betty. Sarah hung up, Clara's screams echoing in the quiet van. Sarah turned to John, who was grinning and nudging Lily. I would never want you as an enemy, he chuckled. John told Sarah to drive back to the motel. Both women were thoroughly enjoying themselves. John asked Lily if she remembered the names of the 2 men he'd fired for failing the drug test. He described them, as there had been several he'd fired for the same reason. Lily gave him the name of the only one she could clearly remember. Victor Hayes. John started laying out plans for the next day. Sarah, I'm going to have you call Mr. Hayes tomorrow and tell him you saw him kidnap me and that you'll keep quiet for $10,000. We'll have to figure out a way to find the name of his partner. Sarah pulled into the parking spot in front of their motel room, and they all went inside. They went over the day's events, trying to ensure they hadn't made any mistakes. I think that after we're sure Victor Hayes is the man we're after tomorrow, we should go to the FBI. I'm sure this is in their jurisdiction, John added. This involves kidnapping and interstate crime. Lily stood up. I think I'm going to turn in and try to get some sleep, she said, smiling tiredly. She declined Sarah's offer to get dinner and went to her room. Sarah and John decided to skip dinner and went to bed, making love again. The 3 of them were too keyed up to eat breakfast the next morning. They left the motel to make the call to Victor Hayes. John had looked up his phone number and address in the phone book and was relieved Hayes had a listed number. John directed Sarah to the street where Hayes lived. The house was in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Sarah parked about half a block away, making sure John could still see Hayes's face. Sarah picked up the cell phone and dialed the number John gave her. Yeah? A gruff voice answered. Mr. Hayes, Sarah said. This is Karen Hughes. My son just came home and said he backed into your car. He was scared, so he came home and told me. If it's okay with you, I'll stop over this afternoon and give you my insurance information. Hayes started to say something and Sarah quickly added, Okay, I'll see you this afternoon. Bye. She hung up. They watched the house, hoping Hayes would buy the flimsy story and come out to check his car. A few minutes later, a man came out of the house in jeans and a t-shirt, barefoot. That's him, John said. We're rolling now. Hayes walked around his car, looking for damage. They saw him muttering to himself as he went back inside. John put his hand on Sarah's back. I think we should go see the FBI, he said. He'd put the phone book from the motel in the van that morning and found the address of the FBI regional field office. John gave Sarah directions, and they arrived at the building in about 20 minutes. The 3 of them walked into the office and approached the receptionist. John couldn't figure out how to start the conversation, so he just blurted out the first thing that came to mind. My name is John Harrison, and I'm supposed to be dead. Sarah laughed softly at his awkward attempt to explain why he was there. The receptionist blinked, reached for the phone, and asked to see Agent Carter, as a Mr. John Harrison was in the building. A young man came into the reception area and stared at John for a few seconds. My God, it is you. Wait here, he said, ducking back into a secure area. He returned about 20 seconds later with a female special agent. Mr. Harrison, she said, extending her hand. Come on back to the office. John heard a noise behind him and saw 2 other agents had appeared out of nowhere, positioning themselves between him and the door as if he might try to run. I think you'll want to talk to these 2 also, John said, indicating Sarah and Lily. They were all led back to an interrogation room. The agent asked if they'd like anything to drink. When they declined, she asked them to sit down. The agent introduced herself as Special Agent Karen Carter and reintroduced the young man as Special Agent Howard. The 2 agents who'd materialized in the reception area weren't introduced and remained on guard behind Sarah, Lily, and John. Mr. Harrison, where have you been? Agent Carter began. John related the facts of his kidnapping and the events up to that day. Sarah added details about his injuries and how she'd found and treated him. So you're a doctor? Agent Carter asked. No, I'm a veterinarian, Sarah answered. There was a blizzard, and I couldn't get him to a doctor, she added. All the agents smiled slightly at her practical explanation. Agent Carter leaned over to Agent Howard and whispered something. Agent Howard left the room. Agent Carter continued questioning John, sometimes repeating questions. Agent Howard returned and nodded to Agent Carter. Mr. Harrison, will you please come with me? Agent Carter asked. John got up and followed her to another room. As he left, he heard Agent Howard start questioning Sarah and Lily again. In the new room, A doctor met John and asked him to strip to his underwear. Agent Carter asked if he minded her staying for the examination. John said he didn't. The doctor examined John's wounds, and pictures were taken of his scars. John was allowed to get dressed and was led back to the interrogation room. Agent Howard was still questioning Sarah and Lily. The phone in the room rang. Agent Carter listened to the caller, then hung up without comment. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to put you through all of this, but we had to make sure your wounds weren't self-inflicted. We've been trying to find you since your disappearance. I've been assigned to your case and have been wondering where you were." John looked at her. "How did you know I wasn't dead?" "We suspected either you wanted to disappear, or someone had killed you and hidden the body. We were leaning towards the former. Now I believe your story, and I feel we can wrap this case up." Agent Carter paused. "You would have died if you were in the plane when it crashed. But no body parts were found, and animals don't normally carry off every bone, including the skull. Second, we checked, and you were too experienced a pilot to fly into a major snowstorm or in the wrong direction. Also, no experienced pilot would take off without telling his mechanic, even if he thought the plane was airworthy. Lastly, your wife has been contacting everyone possible to have you declared dead quickly. Normally, a spouse waits a little longer. The grieving period is longer than that." Agent Carter's gaze hardened. "Now we have to figure out a way to bring the people responsible for what happened to you to justice." John smiled grimly. "I can and will help with that. I know one of the two men who kidnapped, beat, and shot me. I think I know a way to get them to admit what they did so you can arrest them. Sarah can call them again and demand they both meet her to arrange payment for her silence. The only thing is, I can't ask her to put her life in danger for me again. I think I can find someone to stand in for Sarah," Agent Carter said, a plan forming in her mind. Agent Carter, John, and Sarah discussed in detail what Sarah was to say to Hayes to get him and his partner to meet her. "Where should I tell them to meet me?" Sarah asked. Agent Carter smiled. "There's an insurance company in a freestanding building about a block from here. Let's arrange it for 6 o'clock tonight, and I'll make sure the area is clear. We don't want any innocent civilians hurt." Sarah picked up the cell phone. Agent Carter held up her hand. "You have to go outside," she said. "Cell phones won't work inside the building." Sarah and Agent Carter walked out of the room to make the call. In a few minutes, they returned, and Sarah was smiling. "I think the jerk fell for it," she said. "I insisted there was no deal unless both of them came by 5 o'clock. A young female agent, wired for sound and dressed casually, was sitting in a car in front of the insurance building. Agent Carter had asked John if the FBI could use the van as a command vehicle, and he'd agreed. About 20 minutes before 6, a car with two men pulled into the parking lot and stopped. The men looked around nervously, then pulled out of the lot and drove around the block. They returned a few minutes later, sitting in their car, looking for anything suspicious. After several minutes, they got out and started walking towards the lone car in the parking lot. The young agent got out of her car and walked towards them. She knew this would give the FBI SWAT team a better shot at nabbing the two men. Victor Hayes spoke first. "You looking for us?" "Yes," she answered calmly. "I saw you grab the man from the parking lot. I bet the police would pay plenty to know who did it." "How do you know who the guy was?" Hayes asked, his eyes narrowing. "I read the papers. Everybody's looking for that Harrison guy." Hayes grabbed the agent by the arm, his grip tightening. "Honey, you aren't too smart. I'm going to do the same to you that we did to him, only we're going to have some fun first." Hayes started dragging her towards his car. Agent Carter yelled into her walkie-talkie, "Go! We have them." The FBI SWAT team appeared from the bushes, the top of the building, and the trunk of the special agent's car in a matter of seconds. The two men were on the ground and handcuffed before they knew what hit them. They were thrown into a car and taken to the field office. The whole operation had taken less than 2 minutes. The two men were put into a lineup, and John identified them as the ones who had kidnapped, beaten, and shot him. John was taken back to the interrogation room where Lily and Sarah waited. Agent Carter walked in, a smile on her face. "This case is solved. I think they're singing like birds." Agent Carter got a mischievous grin. "John, would you be willing to confront them? It might help convince them it's pointless to lie or hold back any information." John agreed and was taken to the interrogation room holding Victor Hayes. When John walked in, Hayes went white and started to cry. Agent Carter then led John to another room, where he confronted the other man. The man paled and immediately started yelling that Hayes had made him do it and that he was afraid Hayes would kill him if he didn't. John started to reply, but Agent Carter pulled him out of the room. "That was the worst guy," John said, his voice grim. "He was the one who shot me, even though they thought I was dead." Agent Carter told him the man's name was Steve Sandos and that he was wanted for crimes in other states. Agent Carter talked to John, Sarah, and Lily, saying they would move on Clara and Tom in the morning. Both were at a large charity event attended by 2 congressmen and the mayor, and she was afraid an innocent bystander might get hurt if they tried to arrest them there. Clara and Tom had the FBI following them all night, and the FBI staked out their houses after they went home. Agent Carter, I wonder if I could make a request, John asked. I would like to confront my wife when you arrest her. You'll have to do exactly as I say and not cause an argument or try to get any revenge, she said. She asked where they were staying and allowed them to go back to the motel with the FBI following. An agent was in a car in front of each motel room, and another was at the rear. They all went to bed as soon as they reached the motel. Sarah and John lay on the bed, holding each other all night. Sleep came slowly. In the morning, Agent Carter put the three of them in an FBI car and drove to the offices of John Harrison Developers. They parked half a block away and watched as Clara and Tom got out of their cars. Because several people were nearby, Agent Carter decided to arrest them in their offices instead of the parking lot. About half an hour after Clara and Tom went into the building, 6 FBI agents and John walked in. Agent Carter pulled the receptionist away from the switchboard and told an agent to ensure she didn't make or receive any calls until Carter said it was okay. The rest of the agents and John got on the elevator and went to the floor where Clara and Tom had their offices. As they walked into the waiting room outside Clara's office, an agent pulled the secretary from her chair and pushed her towards a far wall. Agent Carter flashed her badge. FBI, if you make any attempt to warn Clara Harrison that we are here, I'll charge you with accessory to conspiracy to commit murder. Do you understand? The terrified secretary just nodded. Is Tom Evans in there? Carter asked. The secretary nodded again. Is anyone else in there? The secretary shook her head. Carter and 2 agents opened the door and walked into Clara's office. FBI, Agent Carter, she said, flashing her badge. Clara was reaching into her desk drawer as they entered. Agent Carter had her gun drawn and ordered Clara to put her hands in plain sight. Clara put her hands on the desk. You are both under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, felony assault, grand larceny, and making false statements to the FBI, Agent Carter said. An agent started towards Tom Evans to handcuff him and walked in front of Agent Carter. Clara grabbed a revolver from the open desk drawer and put it to her head. All 3 agents dove towards the gun. Clara pulled the trigger before they could reach her. Her blood splattered the desk and the wall behind her. Pandemonium broke out as the FBI rushed to secure the entire office floor. John was quickly escorted out of the office to the car where Sarah and Lily waited. Tom Evans was taken to a waiting car and driven to the field office. Agent Carter immediately called her supervisor. Within minutes, the parking lot was filled with police and FBI vehicles. It took several minutes for Sarah and Lily to get John to tell them what had happened. When he finally did, Sarah grabbed him and held him tightly, trying to comfort him. Sarah, Lily, and John were taken to the FBI office and questioned for about 12 hours, placed in separate rooms. John lost track of how many different agents he spoke to. Around 9 in the evening, Agent Carter walked into the room and told John they were free to go. She asked them to be available if any additional information was needed. Is it all right if Sarah goes back to Utah? John asked. Agent Carter said she could go home. John assured her that if Sarah was needed, he'd have her back in Denver within 12 hours. What's going to happen to the agent who blocked your view? John asked. I'm afraid his FBI career is over, Carter answered grimly. We can't allow mistakes like that to occur. We're going to take a beating from the press, she added. Agent Carter shook John's hand and then led him to the FBI car. An agent drove them back to the motel. Lily went straight to her room. Sarah and John lay on the bed, holding each other. Sleep was slow in coming, but they finally drifted off, exhausted. They woke up around 9 the next morning. After showering and dressing, they went to a diner and sat down for a large breakfast. It feels great not having to hide my face anymore, John said, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. Sarah searched his face, trying to gauge his true feelings. Are you going to be okay? John reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. As long as I know you're with me, I will be fine, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. He kissed her hand. Sarah looked down at the table, a hint of sadness in her eyes. I'm going to have to get back to the ranch soon. Do you have any idea what your plans are? Sarah, my only plans are to clean up this mess here and then ask you to be my wife, he said, his gaze intense. Is it going to be a long-distance romance? She asked seriously, her voice laced with worry. John continued to hold her hand. I have some ideas. Let me straighten things out here. Please don't give up on me yet, he added, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. Sarah put her head on his shoulder. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Sarah was afraid of losing him once he returned to his old life. After they finished eating, John insisted they drive to his office building. Most of the employees greeted John as if he'd never been away, relief and happiness evident on their faces. John called maintenance and had them contact the Lincoln dealer to make a new set of keys for the two SUVs. When the keys were delivered, he handed one set to Sarah. "This is yours. I'm going to buy both of them from the company. We don't need such expensive company cars." "But I have to get the van back to Utah," Sarah said, a practical concern. "I'll have a towing company with a rollback take it back," he replied, dismissing her worry. Lily insisted on going back to work and was treated like a hero by the staff. Sarah stayed a while longer, not wanting to be apart from John. "Well, I'd better be getting back to Utah," she said finally, her voice heavy with reluctance. John grabbed her and pulled her into a tight embrace, kissing her hard. "I promise to clear this up as soon as I can and come to you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll call you every day. God, I miss you already, and you're not even gone yet." Sarah pulled away and got into the SUV. She kissed John again, her eyes filled with tears, and started the car. John watched her as she drove away, wishing he could run after her. Sarah drove for a long time, tears blurring her vision. Back at the ranch, she worked feverishly, trying to keep herself busy enough to fall asleep as soon as she went to bed. The house felt too large now, the silence amplifying her loneliness. John called several times a day, telling her how much he loved her. The evening phone calls were filled with promises of what he would do when he finally held her again. Sarah loved talking to him, but it wasn't the same as being with him. She felt a familiar insecurity creeping in, but deep down, she knew her connection with John was different. About 5 weeks after Sarah returned to Utah, John didn't call one morning. Worry gnawed at her. By noon, still no call. She went into the cabin and sat down, a heavy feeling of dread settling in her chest. She felt lifeless, the desire to do anything draining away. Sarah looked out the living room window and saw a car turning off the state road. As it got closer, she recognized the sleek lines of a Lincoln SUV. She ran out the door as John pulled up in front of the cabin and got out. Sarah flew into his arms, hugging him so tightly he let out a surprised, "Oof, why didn't you call me?" she asked, tears streaming down her face, relief washing over her. "I had something I wanted to give you in person," he said, a tender smile on his face. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a huge, sparkling diamond ring. He took the ring from the box and slipped it onto Sarah's finger. "Will you marry me, Sarah?" he asked, his eyes filled with love. Sarah looked up at him, her heart overflowing. "I asked you once before if this was going to be a long-distance romance." John laughed, a deep, joyful sound. He put his arm around her and led her back into the cabin. He placed a stack of papers he'd been holding under his arm on the table. "I've finally arranged everything so I can run the company from here. I hired a new president, he's first class, and I'm now CEO. In this age of computers, there's no reason to be in the office every day. I want to put a runway on the ranch so I can commute when I have to, if that's okay with you. I have some computer experts coming to set everything up, and all the company files will be accessible from here." John took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "We'll have a great life, Sarah. You'll have homes in Colorado and Utah, and a man who loves you more than life itself." "Now," he said, his voice softening, "you haven't given me an answer yet. Will you marry me?" Sarah threw her arms around his neck, tears of happiness now flowing freely. "Yes, John, I will. Now," she said, pulling back slightly, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Let's go to bed. You have 5 weeks of loving to catch up on." She took his hand and started leading him towards the bedroom. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.